Well, good evening. Hi, I'm Gary, amateur radio call sign Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, and this is a ham class. Specifically, it's an amateur extra class. This is the top level amateur radio license in the United States. So this class is designed for those folks who might already have their general or possibly advanced class license and would like to upgrade to the amateur extra. And we work out of this book, the American Radio Relay League License Manual for the extra class. This is the 13th edition. Just came out in July, and so this is the book you want, not the earlier editions, because this one has the questions and the answers that would be on your test. And you get your upgrade by passing a 50-question multiple choice test. And so what we do here in class is go through the book chapter by chapter. We try to illuminate some of the things that are talked about in the book. Focus in on the test questions that would be asked from the topics in this chapter and get you all ready and comfortable with your ability to take the test. We're targeting toward December to conclude this class. So we meet every Tuesday night, and if you're just tuning in on YouTube, welcome. Very happy to have you with us. Let's go ahead and get started. I just want to let you know about Blue Text. In the book, or in our presentations, I should say, that you see, if we have highlighted anything in blue text, this is specifically referring to something that might be a test question. So that's kind of a hint. So keep that in mind. Also, I want to let you know about the American Radio Relay League. So they call it the graphical frequency allocations. I call it the color chart. And it's in your book on page 2-2, but it's kind of a poor facsimile. If you would like one of these, it's not laminated, but it is glossy on 8.5 by 11 paper. We could send one out to you. All you need to do, and this for YouTube as well as the folks in the Zoom classroom, just send me an email at w4eey@arrl.net, and I would be happy to mail you. Give me your mailing address. That's always important. I'd be happy to mail you one of these charts, which could be helpful not only in your amateur radio station, but as we go along here in the class. Now, I've never asked for this before, but have you looked at the price of stamps now? A first class forever stamp is 73 cents. Yikes. Okay, honesty time, I'm old enough, I remember 2-cent stamps. And not makeup stamps. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about letters or postcards that you could send for 2 cents. So if you wouldn't mind, if you want to get one of these color charts, happy to send it to you. But if you have some extra cash lying around, if you could just donate to us a buck or two to help defray the costs and maybe pay somebody else's. There's super thanks in the YouTube chat. There's super thanks on the YouTube recordings if you watch on a PC. And there's a PayPal link for donations at my website, W4EEY. So we've sent hundreds of these color charts out, and it's starting to cost. It's starting to mount up. So we're trying to ask for your help in this regard, and we appreciate it. All right, tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 2. We're going to cover the entire chapter in the first hour of class tonight. And then we'll go on from here, take a break, a 5-minute break, and Dave will come back to do his part 2 of his math introduction to get us prepped. The whole point of this that Dave is doing is to get us prepped for the upcoming Chapter 4, which is always the one that people are most concerned about. But we're going to get you through it, piece of cake, no problem. So operating practices, general operating, that's section 2.1. So go ahead and, if you would, unspotlight me, Dave. And just by a show of hands here, and maybe Bruce, you can put them up on YouTube just so you can see here. How many of you are already on the HF bands? The majority of folks are already on the HF bands. Okay, great. You can spotlight me back. That was what it was all about. The thing is, what do you like to do? Long distance contacts, DXing, that's my favorite. Do you operate in nets, carrying traffic back and forth? Casual conversation. Digital modes are also very popular, especially FT8. We'll talk some more about that tonight. But the prime objective in amateur radio is making contacts, which we also call operating. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Your style may be different. It may be casual, just want to check in with friends on the local repeater, that's fine, or on an HF group that you might get together. It may be goal-oriented. You want to work all states or work all counties or the DX Century Club, many, many more. And then you may also want to participate in contesting, working as many stations as you possibly can during a limited period of time. DXing, that's one of my favorite things, making those contacts with faraway exotic stations and then obtaining confirmations of the contact. And DXing and contesting are both good because they put stress on you and your station. It establishes a goal for your efforts. It motivates improvement in you and your station. If you go to any DX conferences, you'll find out you meet the most interesting people, other DXers. They tend to think of themselves as the elite of ham radio, whether they are or not. And there's a sense of satisfaction when you make a difficult contact using a station that you have put together. Your antennas, your radios, your transmission lines, etc. So that sense of accomplishment. One way you can mark that or measure the sense of accomplishment is the DX Century Club. And it's operated by the American Radio Relay League. And the century means 100 countries. When you have worked and confirmed 100 countries, you can submit your QSL cards or other confirmations to the ARRL, and they will issue you a certificate. And the goal is to reach the honor roll, which means that you've worked all but, if not all of the stations, all but a few of the stations that are out there. It's over 300 and some odd now to get on the honor roll. I don't think I'll ever get there. I'm at about 210 right now. But it's an accomplishment, and it's a way to measure your progress. Okay, the question is, though, how do you find the DX? By tuning, that's one way. We talked about earlier tonight, there's a secret ingredient to amateur radio. It's called BIC. Apologies for anybody who's sensitive. Butt in chair. The more time you spend with your butt in the chair working the radio, the more likelihood you're going to have of working the interesting contacts. And you can do research and planning, find out what DXpeditions, for example, might be on the air during a certain period of time. The American Radio Relay League publishes a regular weekly newsletter with this information. You may have a local group of hams that are DXers and share information. That's great. And then there's DX clusters, and we'll talk a lot more about that. This is a great book, although it's somewhat dated now. I think I read this book for the first time back in the 1980s, and it's gone through a number of editions. I think it's up to the third edition. The Complete DXer by Bob Locker, W9KNI, highly recommended. It talks about some of the early methods that hams used to share DX knowledge. Local amateur radio repeaters were used. Or back in the day when long-distance phone calls were so expensive, they'd call people and let it ring once and then hang up. That was a clue to get on the air to a pre-described frequency and find out what's on the air. They had follow-up HF frequencies where they'd trade stories about how they worked it. And there were things called DX tout sheets, which came in the mail. Well, all of that, we're in the modern age now. All of that has been superseded by DX clusters. And as I was putting this together, I thought, well, maybe I should do a history of the DX cluster. I don't have to. It's already been done. And so I found this on YouTube from Dan N9LVS, the history of the DX cluster. I contacted him. I have his permission Let's take a look.
In this video, we're going to take a quick look at the history of the DX cluster. Most people know the DX cluster by website.
Where'd he go?
In this video, we're going to take a quick look at the history of the DX cluster. Most people know the DX cluster by websites that look like this. But where did it start? Cars were a little different back then, and packet radio was first introduced into amateur radio in 1978 through research done by the Montreal Amateur Radio Club. This was followed by the creation of the first TNC, or Terminal Node Controller, designed by Doug Lockhart, VE7 APU, of the Vancouver Amateur Digital Communications Group. This was followed very quickly by TAPR, the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio, with creation of the TNC-1 in 1982, and then the TNC-2 in 1984 and 85. Packet radio revolution ignited, sold over 1,000 TNC-2 kits. The TNC-2 was what was needed to make this mode good for the masses and not just the experimenters. From there it went very quickly from 2 or 3 operators in any given city to thousands of radio operators, and manufacturers selling TNCs of all shapes and sizes. Turned to the late 80s, and more software for the TNCs became available. Emergency communications networks were set up, chat bridges, bulletin board services, as well as the DX cluster. Dick Newell, AK1A, during the late 1980s developed software called Packet Cluster, which became very popular and an exciting way for ham radio operators interested in DXing to exchange DX-related information. Many cities now have DX spotting nodes and networks, or HF operators, connected to their local DX cluster in order to receive reports on the latest DX. These type of packets came about from those interested in chasing DX. Many amateurs like to frequent the HF bands, looking for that rare international operator to contact. A DX cluster allows many HF operators to be connected over the packet radio at the same time, by still operating on the HF band and hunting for that elusive DX. When someone finds a station, they send a packet message on the DX cluster, which then sends the information to all the packet operators using the DX cluster. In this way, you have several stations monitoring the band looking for that DX. Often an amateur will spot a DX station and then distribute the DX report almost instantly. The DX cluster allows everyone to operate many more hard to find DX stations in one evening than was possible with just oneself. Some amateurs have been known to attain enough contacts to qualify for DXCC in a matter of weeks. There is also a good chance of a pileup on a particular DX contact due to all the people that are on the DX cluster. That was yesterday. And yesterday we had to connect to a TNC or the DX cluster, or the other option we had was a BBS service or a Telnet service, both of which required a phone line and a modem. Today we have the internet, which has quite a few websites dedicated to DX spotting, including DX Watch, as well as DX Summit, unless we not forget DX Fun, and even eHam has a spotter page. DX apps for your phone are also all the rage. For Android phones, NKC Cluster and Ham Radio DX Cluster, as well as DX Fun Cluster. And for Apple, there's DX Spot and DX Macrolis and DX Cluster for the iPhone. We can also find DX spotting in logging software like Ham Radio Deluxe and DX Stream. So has the DX cluster changed things in the last 35 years? Absolutely. That elusive contact isn't as elusive as you thought. Get on HF, connect with the DX cluster, and have some fun. 7 threes and good DX from N9 LVS.
Thank you, Dan. And yeah, things have changed considerably, and someone might say it's easier. But on the other hand, there's a lot of technical ability that's required to get things working in your station that weren't faced back in the tube days as well. So yeah, it's a trade-off. Making a DX contact, I think, is an art. Remember, we're here to advance the radio art. That's one of our goals. So you need to know the bands, where things are likely to be open into certain locations at certain times. Know the target, when is the station likely to appear. Know your station and its limitations. That new antenna might really help out if you have a goal of getting a DX station in your log. Know your radio, how to operate the knobs, how to control the filters, the noise reduction, any little thing that can help you get that last dB of signal. And then know yourself. Know when it's time to say, okay, I'm going to walk away from the radio, take a break, and we'll come back when I'm in a better mood. Because that happens sometimes as well. Working DX, this is one thing you're going to have to know. You're going to have to know how to do the splits. Well, split anyway. Not that. No, split operation. Split operation is the situation where you will be listening on one frequency and transmitting on another. generally in the same band, although it is possible for cross-band split operation to occur. And it's usually controlled by the DX station. The DX station will say, I am listening here, but I am listening 5 up, or I'm listening 5 to 15 kilohertz up for single sideband, for example. So that's split operation, or as the Italians call it, split, split. You'll hear that on the air. When the DX station says that they're listening on one frequency, what you can do with your radio, and this is where you need to know how your radio operates, you can set up 2 variable frequency oscillators, one to listen to the DX station, and the other to transmit where he says he is listening. And the whole point of all this is to try not to transmit on the DX frequency, or you will face the wrath of the DX police. People will make fun of you a little bit. So here's from a book, The Successful Amateur Radio Operator, a look at a split operation in CW. It's a 3 kilohertz shift or split here. The DX is, let me turn on my laser pointer. Whoops, I lost my... There we go. So you see the DX station is here on 14.025. This is where he is transmitting, and here's the pileup of all the stations that are trying to call him. And it's the DX's job to find a station in this group to come back to. So you can do that with 2 VFOs. By setting one VFO on the DX frequency, and the other VFO you can use to move up and down to try to find a clear space or a space where you think he might be listening to get your signal through. With Morse code, because the shift or the split isn't that far, you can also do it with a radio that has 1 VFO and receiver incremental tuning. I've not done it this way, but it is possible to do it. That's for CW. Most radios don't have enough shift in receiver incremental tuning to do it for single sideband, where they're talking about 5 to 15 kilohertz of split. So again, to review then, why split? Well, because the DX station may be transmitting on a frequency that is prohibited to some stations, or to separate the calling stations from the DX station, and then in general to improve the operating efficiency by reducing interference and getting a higher throughput, a higher rate of contacts per hour. So I was on the air the other day trying to work some DX, and here was K8R from American Samoa on the 20 meter band operating split. Let's see if I got him. We have Kilo 8 radio on 20 meter single sideband. We have the radio set up for split operation. So what you're looking at here is the front panel of my Maestro controller. And if you look up above here, get the right hand, this is my receive slice. This is the A slice, and it corresponds to this frequency here, 14.285. So K8R is transmitting on 285, and over here is my transmit slice, which corresponds to 14.290, or 5 kilohertz above the receive frequency. Notice the transmit light is illuminated over here on the B slice, not on the A slice. So this means I'm going to be transmitting over here and listening over here. I'm going to go 5 up. Tried him earlier and was unable to get through. Whiskey 4, Echo, Echo, Yankee.
Kilo 8 radio, lifting up.
Whiskey 4, Echo, Echo, Yankee. Whiskey 4, Echo, Echo, Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. I assume he's tuning around. He was saying 5 to 15 earlier. Now he's gone. 5 to 15 kilohertz above. Up. Here's another view of my station. This is what I'm seeing when I'm in the shack. And of course, here's the Maestro screen that we were seeing before, UTC time. Up above is my logging software, the N3FJP amateur contact log. Note this section down here is a DX spots retriever, so it's actually receiving spots. And you'll actually hear the logging software announce a spot a little later on. Over in this direction, where am I going? This is a software from Karl Mareski, Pegasus Plus. It interfaces with my radio as well, kind of provides a more conventional front panel display that's virtual on the screen. Note the VFO-A right here on the bottom, and VFO-B is up on the top, and you'll see the B go red when we transmit. Above that is the control panel, the front panel of my RF Kit S legal limit amplifier. And then finally over here we have a PST rotator, which is controlling the rotation of my hex beam. Let's carry on. Let's see if we can work him. Saturday the 27th of July. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo
London
Yankee.
Spot, American Samoa, 20, SSB.
That's my logging software that announced another spot coming in.
Japan Alpha 2, Japan Bravo Tango 5. Arigato, listening up.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. I don't know if you noticed he said arigato, so it seems he's working Japan.
Delta Hotel, come again. Japan Alpha 2, Delta Alpha Hotel, Roger.
Japan Alpha 2, so another Japanese station. So at this point I was concerned his antennas were pointed away from me.
Japan Alpha 2, Alpha Delta Hotel, you're fine, Arigato, QRZ up.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee.
Needed spot, American Samoa, 20, SSB.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee.
AC4G, you'll find that.
So AC4G, so he was working a U.S. station. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee.
Radio something for Mike, okay? India Whiskey 4 Mike 59. Thank you, QRZ.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. So you can see here on the spectrum display, here's some energy from another station that was trying to work him. I wasn't transmitting at that point. And up above here, a little higher in frequency, is another station that is also likely calling him. But I did not have receive turned on here, so we couldn't hear what the call sign of this station was. But you could. It's another way to monitor the situation. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. All right. Nope. So in the end, I didn't work him. But here is an example of split operation on single sideband. Yeah, didn't get him that time. All right, so here's another embarrassing story. That was a little embarrassing, but okay. And the thing is that it's not, oh, sorry, Bruce, I jumped the gun there. This is not if this is going to happen to you. It's when this is going to happen to you. So you saw my station there and how I operate using the Maestro control panel. My radio is the Flex 6600. And I was setting up on a DX station very much like that. Had the DX frequency on one slice, had my transmit frequency on another slice, and getting all ready to call. All right, it's my time, and I throw my call sign out, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, and what do I hear on the DX frequency? I hear a voice saying, "He's up 5, Gary." Uh-oh. It was my friend Bob, ND7J, up in Hendersonville, North Carolina, who was also on frequency and also heard me transmit on the DX frequency. So in this case, my friend Bob was the DX police. It will happen to you. You'll hear it happen to others. Don't worry about it. It's a natural thing. Just shrug it off and go on to the next thing. So before you do call the DX station, always listen, listen, listen. Figure out what is going on. Is the DX talking to the loudest station? Is he talking to the last one calling? Figure out what his pattern is and then use that to your advantage. All right, and here is a truth. Do not rely on spotting networks 100%. You must ID the station's call sign yourself. Reason being because people type poorly and there are mistakes. And so that station you think is in Iran is someplace totally different. In fact, if you listen long enough, you go, that's a strange accent, you know, for the Middle East. So don't rely on spotting networks. They're valuable, they're a good tool, but they're not infallible. They make mistakes. And then when you're ready to give them a call, send your full call sign once or twice if you hear others doing it. If there's a prolonged period of silence, you heard me in there, I would throw my call sign out occasionally because I have had experience where the DX station, you know, gets up to get a cup of coffee or something and sits down, and if I'm the only station calling, they can come back to me. It's rare, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's something to know. And know the propagation shifts. If nothing else, know that higher frequency bands, 10 meters, 15 meters, for example, are going to be active during the day, and lower frequency bands are going to be more active at night. And again, if you want to get that color chart, here's another way you can do it, is you can go online to this URL, and you can download the color chart as a PDF file and print it out immediately. But again, if you'd like to get one of the color printouts from me, just send me an email, w4eey@arrl.net, and ask for the color chart and give me your mailing address. All right, Making the contact is only half the battle. Getting the confirmation is the other half. And it's changed considerably over time. Right now, the American Radio Relay League's Logbook of the World, which you can get an account with and interface with your logging software, is the way to go to get confirmations for DX contacts. It's all done electronically, no fuss, no muss, no 73-cent stamps or greater. The international stamps are even more. Paper QSL cards used to be the thing, and back when there were 2-cent stamps, it made a lot of sense. You could also send self-addressed envelopes, and some DX stations would ask for something called green stamps. If you go to a DX station page on QRZ, for example, they'll say, send me a paper QSL, a self-addressed envelope, and 5 green stamps. Green stamps are dollar bills, American dollar bills. They want $5 bills, and then they will send you a QSL card. Okay, what you really want to find is a DX station with a stateside QSL manager. Someone who is here in the United States but handles the QSL cards for a DX station, because if that's the case, then you can generally get a confirmation of your contact for just a self-addressed stamped envelope sent to the QSL manager. And last but not least, the ARRL QSL bureaus. They have, which sends QSLs in bulk to DX countries. So we talked about the QSL manager. The QSL manager confirms contacts for a station. Best for us here in the States if it's a stateside QSL manager. But QSL bureaus, like the ARRL, exist in most countries. They handle incoming and outgoing paper QSLs. It used to be the least expensive way to exchange cards. It still is to exchange cards, but the confirmation on Logbook of the World is cheaper. It is also the slowest way to receive cards. Think years. You send off a confirmation via the bureau, you might not get your return confirmation back in a year or two. But here is some more information if you'd like to learn about it for the incoming QSL service and the outgoing QSL service. All right, let's switch some topics here. My favorite, contesting. Contesting is great because it focuses you on a certain period of activity, a certain period of time. I love international DX contests, single sideband contests. That's my thing. I like to do it with either a group. We've got a group of us that work from a station in North Carolina or from my home station here. Either one, it's just a lot of fun to sit down, put your BIC, and make as many contacts as you possibly can. And my motto is for contesting is to have fun, learn something new, and then work to always improve. There's usually a contest going on every weekend. It may not be a major contest, but here are some URLs where you can find different contest calendars that can tell you what's going on. There's also a bulletin that comes from the ARRL about upcoming contests. It's a good chance for a new DX contact. Sometimes stations will go on the air in countries that are not generally active. The thing is that you can use contests to your advantage, even if you're not a contester. If you don't want to spend BIC time, but you really want that rare DX station, look for them in the contest. Use the spots, find them, work them. You don't have to submit a log to operate in a contest, and that contact is entirely valid for DXCC and for other purposes. If you do want to get into contesting, though, there are various categories: high power, low power, QRP under 5 watts, assisted using spots or unassisted, single operators, multi-operators, single transmitters, multi-transmitters, all sorts of different categories. And by far the king of logging software used by most contesters is N1MM Plus. Very powerful, very complex software. It's free. But it's very, very capable. It's got all of the information you need as a contester to maximize your rate, to maximize your score. Here's just some of the various features. When you get the presentation in the handout tomorrow, you can look over this and check out the URL for N1MM Plus. Others like myself use software from N3FJP as well. N3FJP has both the amateur contact log you saw there at my station. Scott has contest logs for specific contests and field day. If you have gone out in June, the third weekend in June, and operated field day with your local club, very likely you've been using Scott's software, the N3FJP field day software. No matter whose software you're using, at the end of a contest, if you're in the contest and you want to submit a log to the contest organization, you need to have your logging software generate something called a Cabrillo file. Yes, years ago I pronounced it as Cabrillo file and I got corrected. That's not. It's Cabrillo file. You can find more information here. It's a text file. And Cabrillo files are used for contest submissions when you're either submitting to an email address or submitting online at a website the results of your contest. Then also, if you've been in that contest and operating at your station using your call sign, all of those contacts are valid for your general log. So you can use your contesting software and export all of those contacts that you made during the contest in something called an ADIF format or ADIF file, .adif. It's the Amateur Data Interchange format. You may or may not realize that actually the logging software that we use, they're database programs. And there are lots of different database programs out there. Scott, N3FJP's software uses MDB, Microsoft Database. That's the Access database file format. Others use the DBase format or SQL, SQLite. But they're all different languages or all different things. The ADF is a standard. And so you can export contacts in ADF and then import it back into your general log to add to your overall contact and country count, for example. So if you're in a contest, is it good form for you to spot yourself? No. In fact, it may be prohibited. The only exception might be in VHF and UHF contests when people might not know you're on the air unless you spotted yourself. And by spotting yourself is meaning putting one of these spots on the air yourself. Now others can spot you, and that's okay. But self-spotting, number one, may be prohibited by contest rules and is generally considered poor form. Gary, I hate contesters. I hate contests when they come on the air. They take over the bands. That CQ worldwide thing, you can't even get on the air when they're on there. And the answer to that are the WARC bands, the World Administrative Radio Conference bands, which were put on the air, established for amateurs in the late 1970s. And contests do not happen on the WARC bands. So the 30 meter, the 17 meter, and the 12 meter bands are all WARC bands. They're great for DXing. And so my recommendation, please, is during a big contest weekend, if you can't, get on the air to do what you want to do, go take a look at the WARC bands. 30 meters. Notice it's in blue. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And when you're in a contest, especially if it's a VHF contest, use the American Radio Relay League band plans. They are your friend. And the band plans are different from the color chart. The band plans are available at this URL, and they're frequencies within the band that are suggested or recommended for use for various functions. So here's a portion, just a small portion of the 2 meter band plan. And so you can see here that there's areas for the national calling frequency, CW and weak signals down here, general sideband operation here. So knowing where things are going to likely occur, you can more likely have contacts. And for contests, VHF, UHF, the highest level of activity is typically in the weak signal segment of the band near the calling frequency, the national calling frequency, per the American Radio Relay League band plan. The most popular form of digital mode right now in the amateur radio community is FT8. And it uses software from Joe Taylor and Steve Franke, WSJTX, which is free. And we'll take a look at some of it here in just a sec. We'll get more into digital modes as we go on. That's a further chapter. But if you've used WSJTX, you can see that they normally, during a normal standard exchange, WSJTX will send signal strength values. How strong you are at the other station in dBm and how strong the station is to you. However, if you put WSJTX into the contest mode, it doesn't do that anymore. Instead, it sends your grid square, your locator, where you are located. Echo Mike 84 for me right now. That's my grid square. And the thing is that somebody who's in the non-contest mode and somebody who's in the contest mode, there's this incompatibility between the two, and sometimes the connection, the contact will never complete. So here's the source for the official WSJTX releases on SourceForge, and you can go download the latest version. Be aware that there are some newer versions, some improved versions that have forked off of this, and we'll talk more about that later on. But it's when you put the software using the settings and the advanced tab, if you put it into different contest modes, whether it be field day or the ARRL VHF contest or whatnot, grid square will replace signal strength in your exchanges. So as long as you're working other contesters, it's no problem whatsoever. But the minute somebody else who just generally calls you, it throws a monkey wrench in the works for sure. All right, switching topics. Remote operation. Linking your station over the internet or via some other connectivity. The control point is where you are controlling the station, whether it be directly at the radio or indirectly at your control point. No special call sign ID is required. So you don't have to say W4EEY operating remote. No, it's not required. Because you are at the radio's control point. And this is my radio. Notice there's no knobs on it whatsoever. It's a radio server. It has to be controlled from some other device, whether it be a computer or the Maestro is what I use. And you saw my station layout there earlier, and so you can see I have the computer and Maestro in my office, connected via a LAN connection to my radio and amplifier, which are in a storeroom in my garage. And then coax goes out from the radio and amplifier out to the antennas on the outside. Every time a signal is converted from analog to digital and then transmitted, you end up having something called latency. It takes some time for that to happen. So in my Maestro, when I'm talking on my microphone, there's some latency before the signal is output over the Ethernet. And then in the radio itself, it's processed. And so this is transmit latency before it gets out to the antennas. Same thing happens on receive. There's receive latency when signals being received by the antennas are converted by the radio into packets to go out to my Maestro, comes to the Maestro where it's converted into audio that I can hear. The delays involved are called latency, and you want to, if you're going to be operating remote, this is something you have to be concerned about, especially if you're going to be operating over the internet, because in my LAN situation the latency is less than 1 millisecond. But when you're operating over the internet, there's a lot of things that can happen, and so the latency can go up. So if you're connecting via the internet, and I can do that with my station, you're going to have more latency, something you have to deal with. But it's entirely possible to work with. And yes, you can operate a transmitting station from a tablet. In fact, we'll do that later on in the class. Okay, here we go. This is our first opportunity to answer some test questions. Thank you for being very patient with that presentation. We have something we call our 3-second rule. Dave came up with this. If everyone would please, when the question comes up, think about it for 3 seconds, and then if you can unmute and give us your answer, and we'll see how we do. So here is your first question. What indicator is required to be used by U.S. licensed operators when operating a station via remote?
D.
Delta.
Delta.
Okay, but I'm not sure that was 3 seconds, but you're absolutely right. No additional indicator is required. All right. Which of the following file formats is used for exchanging amateur radio log data?
C.
D.
Charlie.
Charlie. ADIF. And from which of the following bands is amateur radio contesting generally excluded?
A.
Alpha.
Alpha, indeed. 30 meters, one of the work bands. And what is the function of a DXQSL manager?
Bravo.
Everybody see that? Bravo. Handle the receiving and sending of confirmations for a DX station. Remember, working the station is just half the battle. Getting the confirmation is the second half. And during a VHF-UHF contest, in which band segment would you expect to find the highest level of sideband or CW activity?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yeah, in the weak signal segment of the band with most activity near the calling frequency. And what is a Cabrillo format?
Alpha.
Alpha.
It's a standard for submission of electronic contest logs to the contest organizer. And which of the following contacts may be confirmed through the logbook of the world? Think about this.
D.
All of the above.
Yes, all of those.
Delta.
Special events contacts, contacts between U.S. stations and non-U.S., and contacts for worked all station, all of those, correct. And why do DX stations often transmit and receive on different frequencies? Read carefully.
C.
Delta. Charlie.
Charlie is true.
Charlie.
All choices.
Is Bravo true too?
Bravo is true too, and Alpha is true as well. So
Okay.
all of these choices are correct. So my clue is when I say read carefully, you can kind of guess what I'm meaning there. Okay. How should you generally identify your station when attempting to contact a DX station during a contest or a pileup?
Alpha. Yep.
Alpha.
Yeah, send your full call sign once, maybe twice if you hear other stations doing it. Sometimes you will hear stations, we'll use my call sign, go Echo Yankee, using the last 2 letters of their call sign. That doesn't help. Sometimes it'll work, but no, use your full call sign. Okay, what indicates the delay between a control operator action and the corresponding change in the transmitted signal?
C.
Charlie.
Charlie, that's latency. And not only the control, but also, for example, voice, for example, can be delayed. What information replaces signal-to-noise ratio when using the FT8 or FT4 modes in a VHF contest?
Grid square. Delta.
Yes,
Delta.
grid square. Delta indeed. All right. Hey, we're almost here. This is chapter 2, part 2, amateur satellites. You're doing great. So amateur satellite operation can be as simple as this with a handy talkie and an antenna that can receive both vertically and horizontally polarized in different bands. If you really want to get involved with amateur satellites, you have to look into this organization, AMSAT, which has been operating satellites with amateurs for over 50 years. We used to be able to say that all amateur satellites are LEOs, low Earth orbit satellites. That is no longer the case because a few years ago the Qataris put up a satellite, a geostationary satellite, over Africa. You can see here, this is its orbital position on the equator. And with this satellite, all of Africa and Europe can operate into a geostationary satellite. And you can listen on the satellite, but we can't see the footprint. We're way over here. So we can't go directly to the satellite, but you can go on the internet to this URL and listen in on that satellite and hear activity that's going on. You'll hear all sorts of modes that'll be going on, Morse code, single sideband, FT8, a lot of different things going on. And if you want to hear the full story on this satellite, there was even a TX Factor, which is a British ham radio show episode that talked all about this. But that's the exception to the rule. Otherwise, all amateur satellites are LEOs. And a LEO that it travels from south to north, going over you, for example, is called an ascending pass. A LEO that travels from north to south is called a descending pass. When it crosses the equator, that's a node point, and the orbital period is pretty obvious. It's the time it takes for one orbit. So by comparison, the LEOs here are the little orbit there in yellow, and the geostationary orbits are further out, where they appear to actually stay stationary in the sky. They're actually not. They're actually going usually in a figure 8 pattern, back and forth, and they're under control of a ground station to maintain a stationary point in the sky. So let's take a look at this LEO, moving kind of fast. Is this an ascending or a descending pass? And I'll give you a hint, the north is toward the top.
Is it ascending?
For us, looking at this side of the Earth, it's a descending pass. It's descending from north to south. But on the other side of the Earth, it would be an ascending pass. So you're all probably familiar with operating through radio repeaters, where we have one channel that you transmit on, and it goes up to the repeater and it comes out on a different channel or frequency. Well, satellites do the same thing, only for an entire band of frequencies. So instead of repeating, they have something called a transponder, where it receives one band of frequencies and comes down on another. And for amateur radio satellites, we have UHF and VHF bands. And so mode UV, which you'll see designated for some satellites, you uplink to the satellite on UHF in the 70 centimeter band, and downlink from the satellite on VHF in the 2-meter band. Also, there are mode VU satellites where it's the opposite. You uplink to the satellite on VHF and downlink on UHF. The uplink is always the first letter in the mode. And transponders are linear transponders. They retransmit a band of frequencies, and any modulation can be passed. Though some modes like FM and radio teletype are generally avoided because they use more power. And a satellite has a limited power budget. It's batteries and solar cells, and stronger signals actually consume a lot more power from the batteries and the solar cells. And we'll talk more about that here in a sec. So we have, this is the basic layout of, a receive antenna on the satellite, the low noise amplifier, a mixer of some kind, a power amplifier, and it coming out on the downlink. So this is the uplink side, and this is the downlink side. The mixer is interesting because you can have non-inverting or inverting mixers, and inverting linear transponders are on some satellites. It uses a mixer's difference products instead of the sum products. Remember, a mixer math, and we have F1 plus F2 or F1 minus F2, whatever that might be. So an inverting linear transponder, I want you to think about a mirror image. It uses the difference frequency. So a normal non-inverting would use the mixture sum, and so everything stays the same. The orientation of signals from A to B is, A is lower in frequency than B. Well, here A is lower in frequency than B. But on an inverting transponder, everything is flipped. By using the difference frequencies, all of a sudden what was higher in frequency is now lower in frequency. What was upper sideband is now lower sideband. And also Doppler shift is reduced because changes in frequencies for the uplink side are countered by changes in frequencies on the downlink side. So that's characteristics of an inverting transponder. And the proper way to set transmit levels to a satellite is to use monitor the downlink frequencies using a spectrum analyzer, and then set your uplink power so that your signals match other people's signals on the satellite. Gary, I don't have a spectrum analyzer. Well, or a software-defined radio, something like the SDR plays that have wide enough frequency coverage. They can also be used to receive and measure the signal amplitudes from the satellite. But remember, satellites have a power budget, and you don't want to transmit too high of a signal to the satellite because then you will be a power hog. You're taking power away from other people on the satellite. And remember, you're transmitting your call sign, so they know who you are. And they'll contact you and say, don't do that. All right. This goes back, we looked there when we looked at the DX clusters at packet radio. Well, that technology still exists and still exists in satellites. Amateur radio satellites carrying packet radio, also known as PACSats. And here's the block diagram of a dumb terminal going to a TNC, to a radio, and then to another station. Well, in this case, the other station can be in space. And the satellite carrying packet radio can receive text messages or email messages or whatever you want to call it. For example, if I address a message to Dave, KE4EA, and send it up to the PACSat will store that. And then the next time Dave logs into the satellite will say, hey, I have a message for you, and we'll send it back down to Dave. That's called store and forward. That's used by PACSats. And PACSats can use the VHF, UHF, or they can use L band and the S band. 23 centimeter band or the 13 centimeter bands are the other names for these, the L band and the S band. And a lot of amateur radio satellites are stabilized by spinning them. It's pretty inexpensive. It's kind of a gyroscopic effect, and it keeps a satellite oriented on axis. So here we have a satellite that is spin stabilized, and you can see some of the antennas pointing out from the bottom of the satellite there. But notice that the antennas are rotating, they're moving, they're changing their polarizations. So if you're going to be receiving from one of these spinning satellites, it's best to use a circularly polarized antenna. This is a helical antenna, for example. They will help eliminate spin fading, or that going up and down in signal strength. And how do you locate a satellite in space? Well, back to AMSAT and their software, you use satellite tracking programs, and you input data about the satellite, and that data is called the Keplerian elements. In Voice of America, when we were doing this, we called it ephemeris data, but it's the same thing. And you put your location in as well where you are, and it can tell you where to point your antenna toward the satellite. And Keplerian elements goes back to this German physicist, Johannes Kepler. Okay, more questions, and then we'll take our break. So what is the direction of an ascending pass for an amateur satellite?
Charlie.
Yep, from south to north. Which of the following is characteristic of an inverting linear transponder? Read carefully. I want you to see that. Yeah, the Doppler shift is reduced, signal position of the band is reduced, and upper sideband on the uplink becomes lower sideband on the downlink. All of those choices when you're using an inverting linear transponder. And how is an uplink signal processed by an inverting linear transponder? Yeah, you're using the difference product from the mixer. Yeah. And what is meant by the mode of an amateur radio satellite? We have mode UV or mode VU. Yeah, it's the satellite uplink and downlink frequency bands. And what do the letters in a satellite's mode designator specify? Again, it's another way to same question, the uplink and downlink frequency ranges. And what are Keplerian elements?
Alpha.
Yep, they're parameters that define the orbit of a satellite. And which of the following types of signals can be relayed through a linear transponder?
Delta.
Yep. All of those can be. FM is generally avoided because it's a continuous mode. It's 100% power all the time. But all right, so why should effective radiated power be limited to a satellite that uses a linear transponder? Why should you control your uplink power?
Bravo.
Yes, you have to be a good sharer of power, so to avoid reducing the downlink power to all other users, because that's what will happen. If you transmit too much power up to the satellite, everybody else's signals will shrink, and they'll notice right away. So what do the terms L-band and S-band specify?
Alpha.
Alpha, the 23 and 13 centimeter bands. And what type of satellite appears to stay in one position in the sky?
Bravo.
Yeah, that's the geostationary. And what type of antenna can be used to minimize the effects of spin modulation?
Bravo.
Yeah, circularly polarized. And what is the purpose of digital store and forward functions on an amateur radio satellite?
Charlie.
Yep, to hold digital messages in the satellite for later download. And which of the following techniques is used by digital satellites to relay messages?
Bravo.
Yep, store and forward. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Chapter 2. We did the entire chapter in one sitting. So let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves a snack or something like that. Anyway, let's take 5 minutes and we'll be back with Dave's part 2 of the math intro.
Gary, can you put the URL for getting the color chart off of the ARRL site?
I can't do it right now because we're into our break, but we'll get it back to you later, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll send it by email. All right, let's do our break. Dock your pay.
Well, it's good to be with you again. We had a good time last week, and we're going to continue on and have some more fun tonight. Hopefully, most of you got the email that I sent out Saturday night with 3 attachments. It would be real helpful if you were ready maybe to take some notes on some of those. We're going to be offering some tips and techniques, little helps to answer some of the test questions. So just be ready to take some notes on those attachments. I'll try to share those as we move along. Now, this is the second week of 3. I will be sharing some preparatory material for Chapter 4 following Gary's presentation. So we did that last week, we're doing it tonight, and we'll do it again next week. Next week will be the Learning How to Learn module, which I think you'll find to be very interesting. If you went through the general class with us, you saw some of that, but it's always reworked for every class. It will be unique to the extra. All right, so we'll move to the presentation. So here's the plan. We'll introduce the extra class reference sheet, which is a 1-page summary of everything you need to know for all of the math in Chapter 4, which is pretty amazing. Going to do a radio units review because a number of the test questions refer to kilohertz and megahertz and things like that, so it's helpful to review what those mean. We're going to spend quite a bit of time driving the TI-36X Pro calculator. That is a that'll get you ready, and we're going to do some problems together. Now, if you don't have the handouts or you don't have the calculator, no panic. Gary's going to have all of the handouts in a link that he'll make active tomorrow morning. And if you don't have your calculator yet, just kind of follow along, and it'll make sense later. You can always review this presentation and work through the samples with us at a later time from the YouTube recording. And we're going to be working an exam math problem that looks really scary, but you're going to be amazed that you can do this. So again, we're working toward getting ready for Chapter 4, which is Electrical Principles. And our extra class reference sheet is going to be, just a second, get my laser turned on. Get back to the page I'm supposed to be on. There we go. This is what it looks like. Of course, it's impossible to read here. I'll be breaking this down in sections as we go forward. And of course, if you've got your paper copy, you can follow along there. So one page. These are the 3 different sections. We'll expand on each of those. The picture of the reference sheet and the reference sheet tutorial. I sent just the first page of that, but we're going to be going through setting calculator modes tonight, so I wanted you to have that. Again, this is unreadable on your end, but it'll get you oriented to the handouts that you have, and I'll be expanding on these. The only part of the tutorial that we'll be looking at tonight is how to set calculator modes. Now, the reason that I sent out just page 1, it's a 6-page document, and I didn't want to scare people too bad by sending out the full 6 pages, because there's a lot of things we haven't covered yet, because we haven't managed to get to Chapter 4. But I'll be sending out the rest of I'll be sending out the full tutorial between now and next week, so that you will have it. Now, you might be wondering how the reference sheet tutorial came to be. Well, if we look at the extra class reference sheet, there's quite a bit of stuff here, even though it is on 1 page. But we had a lot of questions from students about what does this mean, and what does multiply mean when you see it in a formula. And I have to credit my wife for being a tremendous help to me, because she was new to all of this. She's an extra now, and she asked me questions that I never would have, it wouldn't have occurred to me that anybody would ask that question. And that's not a negative comment. That really helped me. There's something called the curse of knowledge. Don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's when you know something well enough where you forget what it's like to learn it for the first time. And some of us have that problem to kind of step back and say, well, people aren't going to understand this, so we're going to make sure that we at least make available something that will help them fill in all of those questions. That was the history behind the reference sheet tutorial. So it goes into great detail on everything that's here. So at the very top of the extra class reference sheet is radio units. Actually, what you have is a little bit expanded version of this. And notice that the professor is pointing to this column here, power of 10. So all of these units that you've all heard of, you've heard of megahertz and kilohertz, gigahertz, and picofarads, that sort of thing. These are all in terms of what we call engineering notation, I guess you could call it, where everything, all of the answers are displayed is a multiple of 3 exponent. That might not make complete sense right now, but I'll speak to that a little bit more. Also, I don't know if you're aware, but in the gigahertz frequency band, there's a ham band that actually shares some space with the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi band that you have at your house. Hams are allowed more power, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to maybe help you relate to gigahertz. So you might have, if you remember from high school or college physics, you might have heard things referred to as SI units. That stands for, it's French, Système International, I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, but it's International System of Units, this whole list here, the prefixes. There are actually words that go in between all of these. We're only going to be interested in the powers of 3. With the only exception in ham radio is decibel. Deci means 1/10. That's not even on the chart here, but everything else is in increments of powers of 3. Here's an expanded view. This is actually what you have on your reference sheet. And it shows that in the case of units, that's 0. So if we see something times 10 to the 0 power, that's just the basic unit. Kilo, mega, giga, again, the powers of 10. And this is kind of interesting. It represents what that means compared to the base unit. A picofarad is actually 1/trillionth of a farad. That's pretty small, okay? So I thought this was instructive. And these are the places where you'll probably see these values, some of the words that you've heard. You might have heard of hard drives that are terabyte. That's 1,000 gigabytes. We won't usually have too many teras in ham radio, but just for your reference. Now, if this is completely new to you, or if you want to know more information about metric units or SI units, there is a reference on the ARRL site that you can look at. You can also look to YouTube. If you query on metric units or SI units, there's a ton more information. But I'm giving you just the basics of what we need for our class. The second section of the reference sheet, the middle section, contains formulas. Or if you're a grammar police, you might call it formulae. But I'll call it formulas. So these are the only formulas that you are going to need in all of those. There's pages and pages and pages of math in Chapter 4. But these are the only ones that have test questions. And we're going to be getting into that in more detail. So that's why I keep on saying it's not as bad as it looks. So bear with me there and we'll help you. So some of these formulas have some practical value that you can just see right off the bat. For example, resonant frequency. If you're talking in terms of a dipole antenna, how long is it? If it's resonant too low, well, do you shorten it or lengthen it? You can kind of see adding inductance or capacitance. Either one will change the resonant frequency. More about that later as well. So again, I'm just pointing out the sections on the reference sheet for now. And then the bottom section I've labeled aids. And this is a blow-up of that. We're going to talk about direct and inverse relationships because the pool questions ask questions along that line. We've got something called Eli the Iceman. It's a little mnemonic that will help you answer a number of pool questions having to do with leading and lagging currents for inductors, which is L, and capacitors, which is C. This is detailed to a very large extent in the reference sheet tutorial, which I'll be sending out this week. And then there's like 5 questions in the pool that relate to impedance and admittance, reactance, and susceptance. This is kind of baffling to me because I've never ever needed any of this in all years that I've been a ham. Don't think I ever will, but there's pool questions, so we will be covering it. A little note, you might want to take a pencil note here. Remembering first of all, I think I said there's no calculations that you have to make using these formulas, but there's 5 pool questions that ask the relationship between some of these values. So the first thing that you really need to know is that impedance and admittance are related. So you have to kind of group those 2 terms in your mind. You also have to be able to relate reactance and susceptance as something that's related. And a little trick for that, I like to use a door analogy for this one. A door will impede you from going through, or if the door is open, it will admit you. So if you can remember that kind of ridiculous picture, and a lot of tips and tricks can be used that will help you remember things. That's just one. You might have some other ones that you can invent, but that's helpful to me. So admittance is the letter Y. Well, how do you remember Y versus B, for example? Well, for what I think of there is why would I want to admit you? Okay, there's my Y. And there's another analogy that helps me over here. I just thought of this one today, but I have a friend, Bob, let's call him Bob, and Bob is a very suspicious character. So when I see Bob, I'm going to react differently than I would to somebody else. So that's kind of how I associate susceptance and reactance as a combined concept. Now the other thing about Bob, he's not very dangerous because he's imaginary. And you're going to find out sooner than later probably why that's important, because there's a question about what is susceptance. Well, that's the imaginary part of reactance is the answer. Stuff that's kind of complicated, but all you have to know is that basic fact. So some of these things, again, we're going to be offering little tips and techniques as we go along. And it'll ask you what is the letter for susceptance. Well, think of Bob being suspicious. So some of these things may be a help to you. And you may be able to invent your own. We've had tips from students about how they remember things, and a lot of those are contained in our presentations, and we give credit where we can. A little review on radio units. We saw this, and how things are going up by powers of 3. Already looked at that. And one of the people that used to help us teach this was Tom Walton. He used to jump in here, and he liked to turn the chart on its side. And it's an amazing thing that the brain actually processes information differently if it's presented horizontally or vertically. Isn't that something? So that this was just a way that Tom liked to look at it to help him associate this relationship. Don't know if that'll help you, but it's no extra charge. Next, I'd like to talk about direct and inverse relationships. Now, a direct relationship is written this way. There's a little term down at the bottom called equation whisperer. Some of you may have heard of horse whisperers. Those are people who train horses, and they are so good at relating to the horse that they think that by all external appearances, they're speaking the same language. Well, mathematics is a language as well, and in terms of an equation whisperer, you can look at some forms of formulas or equations and know something about them instantly without understanding anything about the values that are there. And in terms of a direct relationship, we can instantly see that if we increase frequency or inductance, that's going to increase X sub L, which is inductive reactance. The opposite, that's a direct relationship. Anything that changes on this side is going to directly affect this side in the same direction. An inverse relationship does just the opposite. So capacitive reactance is going to increase if either of these decrease. There's some notes there that go with that. Capacitive reactance decreases with an increase in frequency. The value of capacitance decreases. The reactance increases. The value of capacitance decreases. Okay, so you can tell instantly which direction it's going to go. And there are several pool questions that relate to this concept, and we'll catch those as we go. Now we're going to spend a few minutes looking at the TI-36X Pro calculator, and I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the slides and something that we call the calculator cam, which will give you the opportunity to track what I'm doing on your own calculator. So here's a picture of the calculator, and I tried to indicate with red circles the buttons that we would use. Now the first thing that you might want to notice is that it's way less than half the buttons on the calculator that you're going to be using. This calculator lends itself very well to extra class math. Commenting more on that in a minute. But there's not a lot there aren't a lot of functions that you need to use. This thing goes, you can kind of go crazy. There's YouTube videos that talk about all kinds of functions and features, but you don't need most of that. So what are we going to look at? First of all, I'm going to walk through a few things here on the presentation, then we'll walk over to the calculator and actually do some demos that you can follow along with on yours. The first key I'm going to mention is the shift key. That's the blue key that says second on it. Now the concept of a shift key is that it will, once you press it, these little functions that are above the main keys will be the next thing that happens. So if we wanted to turn the calculator on, we would just press the on key. You folks have probably figured this out already. If you want to turn the calculator off, notice that off is in blue just above the word on. So to turn the calculator off, we can press the second key. Come down here and press the on key, which is actually the off key. So that's the concept of the shift key. On, off, and reset. We're going to be resetting our calculators. Notice that there's a reset here, which is a shifted 0. So to reset the calculator, it would be second, and then reset. We're going to talk about the most used keys. First one is clear. Anytime we do a calculation, we always want to clear the calculator first, then we'll blank the display. The enter key is down here at the bottom, and some of you might think of this as the equal key on another calculator, but that's what you press when you finish a calculation and you want to see the answer. Navigation diamond is up here. There's some cases where we're going to want to move the cursor up, down, left, or right, and that's what this will do. This, you can actually press in any of these places to achieve that function. There is an insert delete. I never use this. To me, if I make a mistake, it's easier just to clear and start over again, because none of our formulas are that complicated, but it is there if you want to use it. And then the least obvious functionally is the answer toggle. That's what this one over here. It's got a left and a right arrow on it, and kind of a little squiggly lines, which some would be approximately equal. And sometimes you'll get a very strange answer, like if you put in the square root of 2, for example, the calculator will tell you the answer is the square root of 2. Well, mathematically that's correct, but if you're wanting to use that number, you're a lot more interested in the square root of 2 being 1.414, for example. So if you get an answer that shows the square root of 2 as the answer, if you press the answer toggle, you'll get the answer in a different format. And I think we can demonstrate that as we go. But that can be really helpful. There's multi-tap keys. Here we've got the pi key. And the way that a multi-tap key works is each time you press it, it will do something different. So it'll go, first time you tap it, the display will say pi. If you tap it a second time, it'll say e, which is a natural logarithm, which we're not going to use. And the third time you tap it, I will appear in the display. That's something we'll be using for entering complex numbers. We'll explain that in chapter 4. But that's the concept of a multi-tap key. All right, so let's run over to the calculator cam. Okay, hopefully that's showing up. It is, okay. So let's do some of this together. First of all, I want to turn on the calculator. Get some little things up here that aren't important at the moment. Now, how do we turn off the calculator? Remember, that's second and off. So I'm going to do that. Second, off. All right, well that was ridiculously simple, but you get the idea of the shifted functions. Gary's over there clapping because he followed along with us. That's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back on. So I'm just going to put in some random numbers here, 1, 4, 8, 5, anything you want. And then if you press the clear key, it disappears. Okay, that's like what I said it would do. I'm going to show you something else here, another random entry, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to press enter, and something's going to happen that might look confusing. Look at this. It says 1.23 E3. That's there's a mode in the calculator called engineering format that we want to set, because when we get into entering megahertz and kilohertz and picofarads, it's going to be a lot easier to see it in this format. If I put in, I'm going to clear, put in just the number 5, then press enter. Here we got 500E0. Remember I said anything times 10 to the 0 power is the number itself? Well, here's number 5. And notice what's coming up on my calculator. Everything is coming up with 2 decimal places. Now you might be wondering, do you really want to do that? Well, I recommend it because all of the answers in the book are generally given to 2 decimal places. If this whole display completely filled up with numbers, it would be harder to read. So I'm going to show you how that works in a minute. So here's our navigation diamond. I don't think it'll do anything in this context, but we'll show that in a bit. So error correction, insert, delete. Won't demonstrate that either, but it's there if you want to use it. Answer toggle. Remember I said that would give you the answer in a different format? Let's just try that here. It says 5.00 E0. I'll click the answer toggle, and it gave it to me as the number 5 without all of that stuff. So sometimes that could be helpful. then the multi-tap keys. Let's see how that works. I'm going to clear it. And we'll use the pi key. First time I press this key, it'll come up pi. Well, that's nice. Oh, just for the fun of it, let me press enter and see what happens. It gives us a pi in the display. Okay, here's an example where you might find that less than useful in the answer toggle, or show the answer in a different format. Now it'll show it as 3.14. That probably is useful. So that's a demonstration of what's happening there. All right, jump back to the slides again. We've looked at these things. Okay, we haven't yet actually. Answer function, fraction key, negation key, square and square root, and exponent entry. I'll just point out where those are. There's a function in the calculator, or a register I should say. Anytime you do a calculation, it has an internal register that'll remember the answer. We're not going to actually use that, but you might find it might find it useful for some of the things you might be doing. So if you're wanting to come up with an answer and then continue on with a related calculation, doing shift, this key will put that answer, it'll take it out of the register and put it in the calculator for you. We won't be doing that as anything we do in the class though, but that's the idea of the answer key. The fraction key, I call it box over box. Now what we're going to be doing with this calculator is putting values in so they look exactly like the formulas on the extra class reference sheet. So if we have something that's a fraction, like the resonant frequency, it's 1 over 2 pi times the square root of LC. We would start out, we'd bring up a fraction and put 1 in the upper box and then the rest of it in the lower box, using the navigation diamond to switch between the two. And we'll demonstrate that. We've got the square and square root keys. We'll be using the square root in one of our examples. And then we've got the exponent entry key, which is EE. So if you wanted to put in 10 megahertz, you could put in 10 EE and then 10. That would be 10 times 10 to the 10th power. Well, I said megahertz, it'd be 6, right? 10 times, or 10 times 10 to the 6th power. Okay, and we'll be demonstrating that. All right, so let's go back to the calculator cam. And look at some more things here. It's over here so we can see it. First thing I'm going to do is press the clear key. And we're going to talk about the mode key. That's this key up here, M-O-D-E. Actually, before I do that, let's do something together. Let's reset the calculator. Now, why would we want to do this? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, it's going to reset all of the modes. And it's possible that your VE team will ask you to reset your calculator before you take the exam. Again, you want to check and find out what the rules are for calculators for whatever organization you're going to be testing with, but they might require you to do that. So let's reset our calculator. We can all do this. Reset is down here above the 0 key. It's in blue. So do second and then reset. And here's an interesting display. It says a reset. 1, no, 2, yes. So there's two ways that we can do this. We can either press a 1 or a 2 to make the selection, or we can use the navigation diamond, which we haven't done yet. I'm going to press down once. Now yes is highlighted. And if I press enter, it says memory cleared. Okay, how do I get rid of that? Well, the clear key will do it. Okay, remember those nifty things I was showing you before, like the engineering notation? If I put in the number 5 now, and then press enter, I don't get 5 E0 anymore. Okay, I'm going to clear it. If I put in the number pi, and then alternate, enter. Oh, that gave me a syntax error. It didn't do what I wanted to show you. If you get one of these, all you have to do is press clear to get rid of it. Clear, clear. So what I've done when I reset the calculator is that I cleared some special modes that I set. So I'm going to press the mode key now and point out that we have 6 possible modes that you can set in the calculator. And what happens after you do a reset, these are the defaults. Some of these terms might not make any sense, but it doesn't matter because we don't need it. So angles we're going to leave in degrees. And to get down to the next line, this one we do want to change. Right now, it's giving us norm, N-O-R-M, that's normal. It'll give you, it won't give you things in terms of a power of 10. We've got scientific notation and we've got engineering notation. And what we want to get everything in multiples of 3 for exponents is the engineering notation. So how are we going to do that? Use the navigation diamond. Okay, we're on this line. Use the navigation diamond. Move over to engineering. Now it's blinking, but it's not set yet. To set that, we just press enter and watch what happens. Okay, norm is now regular. Engineering is a solid block and it's blinking. That gives us everything as a multiple of 3 power. The next one down is float. We'll want to change this one too. I'm going to press the down button on the navigation bar. Float will let it display as many decimal points as it's capable of. We want everything to show up as 2 decimal points. You might want 3 decimal points, but I'm going to recommend 2. So I'm using the right side of the navigation diamond. Move over to 2. It's blinking, but it's not entered yet. So it's blinking, that's the selection that we want. So I'm going to press enter. Float has disappeared. Now we have 2 for 2 decimal points. The next one down is one that we also want to change. It says real, A plus BI, and R angle. This is a symbol that means theta. It's for angle. What we want to be able to do is to put a number into the calculator in what's called rectangular form, which we'll be talking about more in chapter 4. And then we want the calculator to display it in polar form. So let's move this over and tell it that we want those kinds of numbers displayed with the value, angle sign, theta, and press enter. Now what's cool about this, all of the rectangular to polar conversions that are required for some of the phase angle problems, the book goes through pages and pages of math using trigonometry. If we can enter a number in what's called rectangular form, it will come up and automatically display it in polar form without having to do any trig. And that's the key feature that makes this particular model of calculator extremely attractive to our class. So we're going to set that one by pressing enter. So we've changed 3 things now. We had the first one, angle display, which we left at the default. We set it to engineering, so everything will show, the answers will show as a exponent multiple of 3. We set 2 decimal places, and then we set the way that it's going to display complex numbers. Now I said that there were 6 settings. The other 2 we don't need to change, but just for the fun of it, let's look at them. I'm going to press the navigation diamond down 1. They use us decimal, hex, binary, or octal, which we don't care about. The next one down says classic or math print. We want to leave both of those at the default. Now, if for some reason you manually change this to classic, one of our functions won't work properly, the box over box function. So we've got all of that done now. We've changed the 3 that we want to change. Now it took me a long time. I really scratched my head. How in the world do I get out of this menu? I finally figured out that if you press clear, it gets you out of the menu. But it didn't erase any of my settings, and I can prove that to you by pressing mode, and all of those things that we changed are still there. Now, everything that I just went through are on page, also appear on page 1 of the reference sheet tutorial that you have as a handout. So we've gone through all of that. So if you're tracking with me so far, you're doing great. Already looked at that. Okay, now we're going to do some really, really hard stuff. All right? We're going to do some, we're actually going to do some calculations. I'll give you an advanced peek here over on the slides. Right here. Do you think that we could add 3 plus 7? You probably wouldn't need a calculator to do this, but there's some things that we can explain along the way that will help clarify some of this. Then we're going to enter 17 megahertz. We're going to be able to use the exponent entry key. And then we're going to do picofarads and microhenries. These are negative exponents. So this is going to be times 10 to the 6th. Picofarads is times 10 to the minus 12th. Microhenries is going to be times 10 to the minus 6th. So we're going to be using some positive and negative exponents in these examples. So follow along on your calculator. Go back to the calculator cam. All right, we're going to add 3 plus 7. All right, calculator is turned on. And what's the first thing that we always do? Anybody can yell.
Clear.
Clear, yes, press clear. Okay, so I'm going to do 3. And these are the arithmetic keys over here. Plus 7. Before I press enter, just think to yourself what you're going to expect to see. Enter. 10.00E0. Hopefully that's what you were thinking. Okay, that wasn't so hard. Let's try entering 17 megahertz. So I'm going to press clear. 17. Now we need to take it times 10 to the 6th power. That's the EE, or exponent entry key. EE, it'll show just one E. It's the EE key, it shows an E. And then that's times 10 to the plus 6th, so I'll put that in. So we have 17E6. And then when I press enter, it'll say 17.00E6. Now if I press the answer toggle key, we get the full 17 megahertz. Of course, working with numbers that have that many zeros, it's really tough. So that's the reason that we want to use the engineering display in the calculator. We press clear. Now we're going to do 24 picofarads. Now I got a couple of our students contacted me during the week that were very brave. These are students that tried to work one of the example problems, and it was the resonant frequency problem. They were coming up with a syntax error, and we're going to show everybody why that happens. Okay, so that won't happen to you. So we're going to enter 24 picofarads. So start with clear, 24 EE. Now here's the trick. We want to enter a negative exponent. You absolutely must use the negation key, the minus key with parentheses around it. You cannot use the arithmetic minus key. If you do, you're going to get a syntax error. So 24 EE, negation key, pico, that's going to be 12. So that would be 24 picofarads. Go ahead and enter it. 24.00 E minus 12. Okay, good. That's what we should have. All right, let me do it the wrong way now because some of you are going to see this happen to you. I'm going to do clear, 24 EE. Now I'm going to use this key, the minus key, rather than the negation key, 12. It looks perfect in the display, right? But look what happens when you press enter, syntax error. So if you're getting that on some of these, there's a good chance that you were trying to enter a negative exponent and used the wrong key. I'll clear that. And then finally, let's try 12 microhenries. by now you probably have a pretty good idea what's going to happen. Clear this. It's going to be 12 E. Now microhenries, that's going to be times 10 to the minus 6th. So I'm going to use the negation key to get the minus 6 in there. Press enter, and of course it comes up as we would expect. All right, now I think I've given you enough information where I can absolutely amaze you right now. Actually, we want you to amaze yourself. Let me jump back to this presentation. And here's a problem. It's a pool question. It says, what is the resonant frequency of an RLC circuit if R is 22 ohms, L is 50 microhenries, and C is 40 picofarads? All right. Well, the formula that we need is here. It's on your extra class reference sheet. But notice that there's no R anyplace in this formula. What do we do with R? Well, the answer is absolutely nothing. For a resonant frequency problem, they'll give you a value for R, but you don't need it to calculate the resonant frequency. So that's just kind of a fooler that's embedded. So we're going to jump back to the calculator cam in a second. Here's the problem. This is the formula that we need, the values. And if we're very lucky, we're going to get an answer that's in a ham band. And take special note of that, because there's 2 resonant frequency problems in the pool, and the right answer for both of them happens to come up in a ham band. So that's a way to verify that you got it right. All right, let's go to the calculator cam and let's see if we can do this. First thing I'm going to do is press clear. Now, this is the formula. Notice that it's a fraction, 1 over 2 pi times the square root of LC. So the first thing we're going to want to do is put in the fraction function, the box over box. Notice that the top box is blinking. That means it's expecting an entry there. It's going to be 1. Put in 1. Now, how do you suppose we're going to get down to the bottom? That's what the navigation diamond is for. Now it's expecting something in the bottom. So the formula says 2 pi, and you're going to notice that this is going in exactly the way that it appears in the formula. So we're going to put in 2, and then the multi-tap key for pi. Pi happens to be the first one that comes up. And the calculator knows if it sees 2 pi, that means it's 2 times pi. Now we want it times the square root of LC. So the next thing we need to do is to get the radical sign in. It's a square root sign, which is right above x squared. So I'm going to press second. And the square root symbol. And notice that we now have a blinking box inside. Notice how we're building up this formula, and it looks just exactly like it does here. Now what's L and C? Well, L is 50 microhenries. We're going to use everything that we've learned so far. And I'm going to remind you, when we put in a negative exponent, do not use this key. You have to use this one, or you're going to come up with a syntax error. So 2 pi LC, L is 50 microhenries, 50 EE. A micro is times 10 to the minus 6th. Use the negation key, and 6. Now we need to multiply that, L times C, by the capacitance. And here we actually have to use the multiply key, which gives you an asterisk, which is the abbreviation for multiply. And then we want to put in 40 picofarads. So that's going to be 40 EE. Pico is times 10 to the minus 12th. So again, the negation key, not the minus key, the negation key, minus 12. Now if you hold your elbow just right and press enter, let's see what we get. came up with 3.56 E6, which is 3.56 megahertz, which is the correct answer. So let me jump back over here, and if you can unspotlight me for just a minute. I'd like anybody that's out there, did you get the right answer? Just raise your hand if you did. Well, those that didn't, you can go through this again, or if you don't have your calculator yet, do it when you get it. But the majority of people did get it, so that's good. So we can spotlight again. And you're to be congratulated. You just did probably the most difficult problem that we're going to need to do in Chapter 4. So if you were thinking that you can't handle the math, that this is not your thing, that this is too hard, I am really, really hoping that I just proved to you that you can do this. There's other formulas on the extra class reference sheet, and they all work very similarly. I'm going to be sending out 2 additional handouts that show a couple of other kinds of problems that you can try on your own between now and the next time we get together. And that'll be for your enjoyment. Okay, so what are we going to do next week? Back to the presentation. Next week is going to be Chapter 3. Now, Gary's presentation tonight on Chapter 2 was actually, I thought it was a lot of fun because it was actual operating topics, things that are practical. Next week is rules and regulations. That's a little bit harder to get through, but it's very important, very important. And then I'm going to be doing, I'll be up again after intermission. And I've got a thought question for you. Do you think that brain science can help you pass the extra exam? Well, I think you'll probably say yes. So we're going to be considering learning how to learn. A lot of people have taken a lot of classes in high school and college and beyond, and had to learn all kinds of material, but I'm willing to bet that you never had a class on learning how to learn. Now, do you think that might be important for absorbing some of this kind of material? Absolutely. So Barbara Oakley, we're going to be introducing next week, and I'll probably be sending a TED Talk that she does for you to look at as well. And she says learning how to learn is the most powerful tool you can ever grasp. So we've got a lot of tough stuff we're going to be going through, over this extra program. So I think that the principles we're going to talk about next week are going to be really helpful to you. Not only to you, but you can share these with your spouse, significant other, your kids, your grandkids. These are things that can really be a big help. So I hope you're going to look forward to that as much as I am with sharing it. So as I mentioned a couple times, I'm going to be sending some additional handouts through the week. You try to work through some of these on your own. Read through them all. Put you way, way ahead for Chapter 4. And my final comment is, wow, we really covered a lot of stuff tonight. So thank you so much. But I really need you to practice. The other thing that I'd really encourage you to do, we put out information about the ARRL exam review site. You now have been through Chapter 2. You can use that exam review site to go over all of the questions in Chapter 2 that Gary shared with us. Definitely do that. Practice what we showed you tonight.
And I see Vic had his hand up.
Yep, so we're now in the class chat, or Gary, if you have any comments.
Just that next week is everybody's favorite rules and regulations. No, okay. Vic, come on in.
Yeah, just a question. Can you go back one slide where you have usually have the calculator on? Where
Sure.
you have the formula?
Yep, calculator cam is here.
Right, so that's what I wanted
Turn it on. I'm going to press clear. Okay, so what's
Right.
your...
Okay.
Go ahead.
Got it. No, I got it. For some reason, I got 358. So I'm just going to check it out because I got
Okay.
a different calculator, but I got basically the same.
Yeah, you're close. Yep, you're close.
Thank you.
Yep. If you're still having trouble, text me, email me, send a carrier pigeon, whatever works. But you're really close if you got it there.
So we have a few minutes. So we can do a class chat if there's any topics you're interested in or want to talk about.
Just very well explained. Thank you very much. You guys rock.
Thank
Well,
you so
thank you.
much.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I think that's it, Dave.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll sign off then. Thank you all for your kind attention, and definitely review what you do between classes is probably more important than what you do during the class. So please review between now and next week, and Gary will amaze us with rules and regulations.
You're doing great, guys.
Yep.
73. We'll see you next week.
73.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.